Welcome to this extension of Good Morning Uganda, which is Good Morning Uganda Extra. I'm Robert Chirabonyoniteno, in case you've just joined, and thank you so much for being with us here on UBC TV right from the hour of 6:30 when we open up our broadcast with Good Morning Uganda till now. Now, just a humble reminder, every weekday we are here from 6:30 till the hour of 10 when we end it all with Good Morning Uganda Extra. Welcome to this wonderful segment. I have yet another guest in studios and we are discussing yet another important issue. Now, so much has been said, so much has been hoped for, so many promises have been made. And we've already said once we start drilling our oil, then we shall have Uganda turn into that dreamland. Someone told me maybe even the streets will be full of gold. We shall have gold in this now. What happened yesterday, we saw His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni commissioning, that is the oil drilling. Now, this was at the Kingfisher Fields, and we have a promise that come 2025, Uganda will be drilling its oil. Now, joining me on set to discuss this, I have Manager Corporate Affairs, Petroleum Authority of Uganda, Madam Gloria Sebikali, with me in studios. Gloria, you're most welcome.
Thank you, Robert, and good morning, viewers of the big network.
I'm very eager and excited. Yes. You know, that's why you see I have smiles, because when I talk about oil, and when we saw His Excellency commencing the oil commissioning, the drilling, now it shows it is no longer rumors. We are no longer going in signing that. You know, you've done a lot of signings. Yes. But even before you dive into that, for the benefit of my viewers, when you talk about the Uganda Petroleum Authority, what is your role in the oil exploration?
Thank you, Robert. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda is the regulator for the oil and gas sector. This means that our work is to monitor the work that the licensed oil companies are doing to make sure they are going by our laws and regulations, but also international best practice. So what happens is that the Ministry of Energy issues out licenses to players to come and undertake oil exploration, development and production. So when these players come on ground, as the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, our mandate by law is to monitor their work. We approve their work programs. We ensure that they are undertaking the work efficiently to recover our resources. We manage the data that is acquired, because all this work leads to a lot of data, so we are in charge of data management. We also ensure that there is environment and biodiversity protection in these activities, that we are coexisting with our beautiful nature. We also look at the participation of Ugandans, because a lot of money is being invested in these projects. So we want to ensure that Ugandan individuals and Ugandan companies are part of the oil story, that we are not just watching, but we are part. That means we have jobs, we have companies that are being contracted to do different works and services. We also look at the costs, because a lot of money is being invested, close to $15 billion in these projects, and some of this money will be recovered by the companies when we start production and selling our crude oil. So we are in charge of ensuring that the costs are efficient, that our profits, our take as government is secure. So we also undertake economic analysis, look at the international crude oil prices, what expenditures are they incurring, are these optimal, and the like. So that is some of the work that we undertake as the Petroleum Authority of Uganda.
Oh, very interesting. So you're the people that we have to put our eyes on in case anything goes wrong, because we entrusted you. Yes. This work of regulatory, monitoring, supervision here and there. Now, Gloria, let's go to what happened yesterday, because we've waited. We are eager.
And we are getting closer.
And we are getting closer.
Yes.
Now, one thing I've learned in this entire oil process, the number of steps.
Yes.
And each step is very significant. Now, when we see the commissioning of the oil drilling, What does this mean? And in your explanation, make it very easy for the lay person to understand.
Okay. So Uganda's oil resources are being developed in a number of projects, being developed and commercialized. So we have projects where the oil is going to be produced from. There are two main projects. That is the Kingfisher project, which is in Hoima and Chikube district. And then we have the Tilenga project, which is mainly in Bulisa and Noya district. So from these two projects, a number of activities are going on. Infrastructure is being developed for us to get the oil out of the ground. Now, when the oil comes out of the ground, it has to be commercialized. What does that mean? It has to be sold and reach the market. So we have two other projects. That is the East African Crude Oil Pipeline project, which will be used to transport the crude oil to the international market via Tanga in Tanzania. And then we have the Uganda Refinery project, where some of the crude oil that's produced from these two other projects in Bulisa, Chikube, will be refined for us to use in our cars and transported to our petrol stations so that we can access it in our cars. Now, yesterday, before I talk about yesterday, I'll just take you back briefly to 2022. On 1st February, the companies that are licensed in the projects, that is the Tilenga and Kingfisher project and the Eco project, announced what we call the final investment decision. That meant that they are committing to investing to develop these resources, to invest close to $12 billion to produce the oil and also commercialize it.
Where many were wondering now, final signing of this.
Yes, final investment decision, because it's a lot of work and a lot of money. So a lot of negotiations, a lot of agreements were signed before our laws were updated that led up to the final investment decision. Now, after the final investment decision, what happened? We saw the oil companies now start award contracts. We are going into the engineering, procurement, and construction phase. So many facilities are now being constructed: roads, central processing facilities, pipelines, etc. So we saw companies awarding contracts. We have over 175 contracts that have been awarded worth close to $6.8 billion. So now, in awarding these contracts, the companies are bringing on board different contractors with expertise in different things to come and work together to set up these facilities.
In this awarding, do we have some contracts that are ring-fenced for Ugandans to promote local content and participation?
Yes, we have a number of contracts that have been ring-fenced for Ugandans in our laws. So we've seen that of this $6.8 billion, about $1.7 billion is going to Ugandan contractors. So yes, Ugandan companies are actively participating. Now, fast forward, so that has been happening since February last year. So we've seen companies go on ground. There've been what we call works to set up the facilities. We've had site clearance works. We've had companies that are now compacting the ground, getting ready for all these facilities that are going to be put in place. Now, part of the facilities that are being developed include the central processing facility, where the crude oil that comes from the ground will be processed before it's transported to the Eco pipeline. We've also have well pads where drilling of wells is going to take place. Because for us to get the oil out of the ground, we need to drill wells. How many wells are going to be drilled? Close to about 460 wells in total are going to be drilled over the next 3 to 4 years. So these wells fall in different categories. We have wells that are meant to gather more data. We have wells that are what we call water injection wells, because oil comes out due to natural pressure, but sometimes it needs support. So they're going to be wells where water will be injected into the ground to support pressure, and then there'll be wells where the actual oil will come out, producer wells. So those make up the over 460 or so wells. Now, when we go specifically to the Kingfisher project in Chikube district, where the president was yesterday, close to 31 wells, about 31 wells are going to be drilled in Chikube district. So yesterday's ceremony was the president launching the drilling of those wells. So the first of the 400 or so wells started its journey yesterday, because you cannot get oil out of the ground without
don't
drilling
drill, yes.
the wells. So as that work is going on, there's also other work that's going on in place. So the reason why it was a very significant event is because these wells, and they're going to be drilled on what we call well pads. So each well pad will have a number of wells drilled on it. So why this was significant is because it is a central point of us moving towards seeing our first oil coming out of the ground. So the clarification we want to make is that some people asked us, okay, is oil going to come out today? No. The target for us to have our first oil coming out of the ground is 2025. That means we are going to see continuous drilling for the next 3 to 4 years for different reasons, to get data, to learn about the pressures in the, and this aids us to ensure that we recover our resources more efficiently.
So to our Ugandans, we are not yet dealing, because one of the issues that has always come out, this oil, they already began drilling it, they are selling it, oil is moving through various channels. Now, Gloria, you're saying it's still, we still have to wait a little
longer.
So
yesterday we called the event the launch of the spudding of the Kingfisher wells for the Kingfisher oil field. Spudding just means the start of drilling, and drilling one well takes a long time. For some wells it might take weeks, for others it will take months. Also, for the viewers to appreciate, the wells in the Kingfisher are different depths. When you're targeting the oil, it's a different depth. So we have wells that are about maybe 600 meters, but the deepest well is about 7.4 kilometers in the ground. So if you measure the distance from here to, from maybe here to, let's say, Ntinda, Nigeria, that's about 7 kilometers. So that is the depth of the well that you're going to drill. So it gives us an appreciation of the time it takes, the technology required, the skill it requires, the equipment, and all these are opportunities for Ugandans, not only for us to see our oil coming out of the ground, but this process that we are going to go through in the next 3 to 4 years is very significant, because a lot of money is being invested in these activities, and that money, part of it, we are working to ensure that it's retained in the Ugandan economy through participation of Ugandans in the contracts, but also in forms of employment with these
now, Gloria, as we talk about this drilling, the commencement of the process, one of the things as a regulator and an overseer body into this petroleum, there's so much concern regarding our environment, and and now this phase, starting from now and thereafter, we see that maybe this is one of the phases where those that have fears of destruction of our environment, from the few clearings here and there, look at how safe is this process. Have we taken due diligence? Have we taken all the necessary research that we need to ensure that this oil is indeed a blessing to Ugandans?
Thank you, Robert. Now that is a very important point. As I mentioned, one of our cardinal roles as the Petroleum Authority of Uganda is to ensure environment and biodiversity protection, meaning that we have to develop our resources sustainably to ensure that we are coexisting. We have the oil activities, but we also have our environment, our nature. We have our national parks, our water bodies, that we protect them. So one of the key processes that took place, that took over 2 to 3 years, is what we call the environment and social impact assessment. So the Kingfisher project, like all the other projects, was subjected to an environment and social impact assessment, and this involved companies that with the necessary expertise to come on ground. They walk the journey of the project, see what are the potential impacts, both positive and negative, document these and say, okay, maybe there's a risk of this, there's a risk of pollution, air pollution, maybe there's a risk of water pollution, or a risk of disturbing the livelihoods of the people. But if we have these risks, how do we guard against them? How do we mitigate them? So a lot of tools have been put in place to ensure that we are protecting the environment. For example, you'll see that the area that is being used to drill these wells has been compacted with different materials. Why? To prevent, in case there's a spill, it is contained and it doesn't go into the surface. Even when you're drilling a well, you don't just go down into the ground. You know, there's a lot of cementing that's done and casings that are put, you know, in the ground. That's the first process. You put a number of casings to ensure that as you're drilling into the ground, you're not spilling any of the chemicals into the environment. Then we also are working with other institutions of government. I mentioned that we do regulate, but we do not work in isolation. We work with other institutions like the National Environment Management Authority to ensure that issues like waste management, because as they're drilling, you're bringing out materials. So what happens to those materials? So there are companies that have already been contracted to manage this waste, specifically for the Kingfisher field. The Luwero Industries, which is a subsidiary of UPDF, is working with a Chinese company to manage the waste. So they've already set up a waste management facility. We work with the National Uganda Wildlife Authority in areas. There's some work that's going to happen in Makshon Falls and other protected areas. So we've ensured that the way that, for example, the well pads are designed in the Makshon Falls is different from the well pad you saw in Kingfisher yesterday. For it, there are bands that are put to ensure that there's no visual intrusion. There are also studies that are now being done with different civil society organizations like Wildlife Conservation Society to see the level of impact on the animals. For example, one of the findings is that sometimes the animals may move away when there's activity, but they don't go far. Some go 100 meters, some go 200 meters, and then you'll see them coming back. We've seen pictures with oil activity going on, and the animals are also there, and the tourists are going there. Still in some protected areas like national parks, we've ensured that the different routes that, let's say, the contractors take are different from the tourist tracks. Some of the companies are also developing alternative tourist tracks, so that there's coexistence with the tourism sector. So there's a lot of work that has gone on before to make sure we are prepared to manage the environment impacts of the sector, but also we've developed what we call environment and social management plans, which are monitoring tools. This work of environment management doesn't stop. It goes on throughout the life cycle of the project.
Viewers, we are still looking at oil drilling in Uganda, where yesterday we saw His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni commissioning that is oil drilling in the Kingfisher. And of course, I'm having the Manager of Corporate Affairs, Petroleum Authority of Uganda. Now, still when you talk about oil, now with environmental challenges, well explained, I must say. Let's take a look at involvement of Ugandans. The last time I went to one of these oil wells, very many years back, I must say, about 7 years.
You need to go back.
I was very curious to see what do Ugandans do. Of course, by then there were a number of modern containers that our brothers that are in this business were sleeping in. I saw some Ugandans planting grass around and all that. But how are we protecting profit repatriation and ensuring that much as we don't have a law guarding against that, but at least our Ugandans, one, get meaningful employment in this oil channel of oil production. And I carefully use the word meaningful employment, because there are some sectors where it hurts me that you would find, if you're not driving lorries there, but meaningful employment, because there's a lot of money invested. I was listening to one of the contractors there saying that this year alone, we expect to invest about 580 million US dollars. And I'm like, just imagine if half of that goes to Ugandans and they have this money, that will be very good enough to transform a number of lives, because there's a trickle-down effect. If I get that money, my relatives trickle-down effect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Robert, participation of Ugandans is very important because experience from other oil-producing countries has shown that the primary benefit comes in these 3 to 4 years. I know many Ugandans, and rightly so, are always asking why has the date for production kept being pushed. But one thing to appreciate, it also has given us the opportunity as a country to build capacity of Ugandans for us to benefit from the projects. This $15 billion we are talking about is going to be invested in these next 3 to 5 years. After that, the investment will go down. So if we do not capitalize during this period, then we'll have lost out a lot. And that is one of the key regulatory areas that we look at as the authority. Now, you raised 2 important issues. One is on employment. How do we ensure that there's meaningful employment? The first level is at the level of the law. The petroleum law and regulations, the national content regulations, provide for targets for employment of Ugandans. And not just general targets. It goes to management level. You have to have at least, maybe in the first 5 years, 50% Ugandans. After the next 5 years, I think it's 70%. Then we go to operation level. I think the target is either 70 or 80% Ugandans. And then at technical level, about 70–80% Ugandans. Then at the basic skills operation level, 100% Ugandans. So those targets are there in the law. So we do monitor employment of Ugandans on a quarterly basis, and part of our approval process of the work programs and budgets of the oil companies, we also look at their organization and human resource structures to make sure that where they are qualified Ugandans, they take over those positions at every level, and where there's an expatriate, an opportunity to build capacity of a Ugandan to take over that position is given. And we also work with the Ministry of Internal Affairs in the issuance of work permits. So whoever is coming in, any expatriate coming into the country to work on the projects needs a recommendation from the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. And we look at, if this skill is not there in the country, how long will it take to build capacity of Ugandans? So we work closely with the Ministry of Internal Affairs on that. The other level, of course, is building capacity of Ugandans. Because before we say Ugandans have to be employed, we have to ensure that there's capacity. So way back in 2011, the Ministry of Energy undertook a study, a workforce skills assessment study, that mapped out the different qualifications required. And it was clear that over 70 or 80% of the jobs are for technicians at certified level, internationally certified technicians. Technicians like welders, plumbers, construction workers, electricians, etc. But some of these trades and craft require international certification. For example, if you're going to weld a pipe where that oil is going to go through, you have to have a certain certification, because the consequence of you doing it badly is much larger than if you've made a mistake, let's say, on a gate. And so what government did was to develop institutes here in country, and one of those is the Uganda Petroleum Institute at Kigumba. I think last week His Excellency was there commissioning facilities at the institute. That institute has grown since it was established in 2009. Now it offers international certification for technicians. It has city and guilds, OPITO, I think America, it's working with also American Welding Society, then ECTIB, which is for construction. So we have seen those skills come into the country. There are a number of private players that are also have invested in skilling. We have people like the Skills and Assessment Center, or QSOSing, Sunmaker, Solid Rock, etc. So there are a number of people that have come together, and all these players, we are working with them in what we call the Oil and Gas Trainers Association of Uganda, to make sure that we are not duplicating, we are giving the right standard of training. So we work closely with these trainers and the Ministry of Education. Now, when it comes to employment of Ugandans, are we seeing Ugandans take over technical jobs and not just the casual jobs? Yes, we are seeing Ugandans take over technical jobs. currently at the Kingfisher project, there are over 1,500 people that are working on the project currently. And we see 92% of these are Ugandans.
Good.
Ugandans at different level. We have Ugandan engineers, we have Ugandan welders, we have Ugandan, support staff. So at all levels, we have Ugandans working. It's also important to appreciate that many of the jobs may be at operational level, but they offer an opportunity to build skill and acquire new technology. So much as we want to see Ugandans at the highest level, we must not also underlook the lower level jobs, because people acquire skill. The companies are required to train their employees and expose them to technology. And so it also gives the opportunity for people to grow on the projects from one position to the next. Secondly, there are a lot of contractors that have come on board. When we talk about national content, we're also looking at are Ugandans providing the required goods and services to these projects. I'll give you an example. The rig that we saw yesterday that the President commissioned, it's, I told you it can drill up to 8 kilometers. It was specially designed for the Kingfisher project. How did it come into the country? It came in through close to 300 trucks, about 280 trucks. Were moving, I think it took a period of about 6 weeks to transport it. It came in from China to Mombasa, then from Mombasa it was transported by road to Chikube district. How did it come in? 280 trucks. Who transported it? A consortium of 4 Ugandan companies. 4 Ugandans in the logistics business said, me as a person, as an individual company, I may not have the capacity. I cannot have the capital expenditure, the trucks, the drivers, to bring this rig. So they came together in a consortium of 4 companies. They formed a company, DDG Logistics, fully Ugandan, and they transported the rig. It has Ugandan CEOs, Ugandan workers, Ugandan drivers. Yes, it might, coming from Kenya, it may use some Kenyan drivers and the like, but we are in the East African community. And these drivers that we are talking about, they're called heavy good vehicle drivers. It also requires a skill because we want to avoid road accidents. And so there's a lot of training for heavy good drivers. We have a lot of drivers in the country, but they do not have skills in safety. They do not know some of the safety protocols, the speeds to drive, how to negotiate corners, how to drive in community areas. And so there's a lot of training going on by Uganda, I think Uganda Driving Standards Association, with other players, both in Hoima, there's a school in Mukono, Safeway, Rightway. They're all doing training of heavy goods vehicles drivers, because before you drive, remember the oil and gas sector aspires to the highest level of standards. So you have to have certain basic skills in safety, in mechanics, etc. And this is what the drivers get training. Some of them can drive, but they just need maybe a refresher training of like 2 months, 3 months to equip them with the skills. So yes, Ugandans are participating at all levels. We have companies that are doing civil works. We have Excel Construction Company. It's a well-known Ugandan company. It has built roads. It works in Jinja, etc. They are the ones doing some of the pad preparation of the well pads where we are seeing that rig. We have companies like Rohi Investments that also doing a bit of civil works. We have GCC that's doing catering. So there are a number of Ugandan companies owned by Ugandans. Some are in joint ventures because there are areas where we do not have the capacity. So that means the law says that the next level, if you cannot contract a Ugandan company, the next level is to get a joint venture between a Ugandan and a foreign company, and the Ugandan company must be actually doing work and not just there in name. And we, as the authority, we approve these joint ventures and go through this process. I think there are about 6 such joint ventures on the Kingfisher project that are currently doing work.
Well, so much involvement of Ugandans. Now, we'll go for a short break. When I return, again, we shall be looking at local content, giving the president's perspective. I enjoyed his speech, more so when he said, I hear a lot about local content. But to me, local content is you have the food, you have the animals for these people to eat. We shall also zero down to the ordinary, the mwananchi, the people who were in these areas previously and in these communities. Let me go for this break.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Happiness comes to us in many places. It's in knowing the mosquito net keeps our children healthy. The wife having the support of her husband. It's in deciding together when to have a baby. And for some, focusing on what's important right now. So what's your happiness? Make the right health decisions to ensure happiness for you and your family.
Every waking day is a reminder just how beautiful this, our land, truly is. The kind of beauty that you can only find here, in the lush green all around us and the wondrous sights within. It's in the distinct aroma of our cooking, to the taste of food that takes you on a journey, in the sound of homecoming and the sound of Mother Earth. In the magnificence we find on our travels and the exciting moments we experience. Ours is the kind of beauty that comes in all things big and small. All we have to do is awaken our senses and truly enjoy what's uniquely ours. Explore Uganda, the Pearl of Africa.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back from that short break, and thank you so much for being with us here on UBC TV. We are still looking at oil drilling in Uganda. Well, we are sure that come 2025, if all goes well, now we are in 2023, just the first month, though it's coming to the end. So we just have a few years when we'll say, yes, it's been a long way, it's been a long journey, it's now done. But, however, yesterday we saw the president commissioning a very important stage in oil drilling. That was at the Kingfisher. Now with me, in case you've just joined, I have the manager of corporate affairs, Uganda Petroleum Authority, that is Victoria, with me, with whom we are discussing more of this. Now, Victoria, local content. The president had his own version. To him, he wasn't so much excited, but he was looking at the ordinary person, saying, grow food, rare animals, this is where we stand. And in that, it brings me to the communities. How because the Kingfisher happens to be more in community-centered. Yeah. So how do these communities stand to benefit? Countries like Nigeria, others I don't want to mention failed cases. I want so much to look at the positiveness in this. Because communities saw they weren't benefiting. They kind of became resentment to some of these moves. How are we guarding against that? Are they benefiting?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Yes, community relations are very key in the oil and gas projects because, as you mentioned, the Kingfisher project is set up in communities, within communities, next to the local communities. I think the village is called Nsonga Village. And yesterday we saw the LC1 chairperson. He's the one that kicked off the speeches. And one of the key things he mentioned is, yes, their communities have gotten employment. I mentioned about 1,500 people working currently on the Kingfisher project. About 500 of these are from the community areas. So that's one area that benefited. But when we look at specifically what His Excellency referred to, what are the communities eating? Do they have food? And the communities, are they seeing the opportunities from these projects? I'll talk about this in two areas. One is that if we look at agriculture, agriculture is a cornerstone of our economy. So what the companies have done is that they've invested in what we call an agriculture development program that is mainly looking at the host communities, Hoima, Bulisa, Masindi, Chikube district. So this agriculture development program has looked at what are the areas that have competitive agriculture value chains in the local communities that can supply the camps where these 1,000 or so workers are living. So through this program, we worked with an NGO called Help Africa that identified the different value chains in terms of vegetables, rice, beef, fish, and other areas that can be sourced from the community. It's not a project that's only being done by government and the companies, but there are other players like the Stanbic Business Incubator that is training farmers, because one of the challenges that was seen is that a lot of the time, yes, these farmers can produce, but they cannot produce the quantities, they cannot produce the quality. And in quality, what do we mean? We mean simple things like packaging, cleaning your produce. If you're taking sweet potatoes, don't take them direct from the farm and want to place them in the camp. No, clean your produce, weigh your produce, know how much it is, so that, because you're going to be paid according to how much you produce. So there's equipping farmers with those simple skills, how to use better farming methods to grow, to utilize a small piece of land, let's say to grow vegetables. If you go to the Stanbic Incubator, they have a demonstration farm in Hoima town, where they train the farmers and then go to their villages to train them on their farms. So there's a lot of work that's going on there. Then secondly, during the land acquisition process, we had close to 727 project affected persons. Now, part of the acquisition of land was what we call livelihood restoration and improvement. This means the projects didn't stop at just paying cash compensation and building for the project affected persons houses, those whose primary residence was affected. No, it went further to do what we call livelihood improvement and livelihood restoration. And this was done in such a way that we first sit down and talk with the communities and see where is your source of livelihood, what agricultural crops do you grow? If you're rearing animals, what are you doing? And so we found out what the communities do, what they're interested in, and what is best suited for their local context. And so we had projects in poultry, where the companies gave, I think, over 5,000 chicks to different community members. We had projects in cattle rearing. Sinok also, as part of livelihood restoration, gave bulls and Boran bulls to the communities to help them grow. Because there are a lot of cattle keepers in Chikube district. There was also a piggery project, and then improved fish farming, because it's by the lake shores, and there was a challenge of overfishing. So what the company does is bring in experts, work with the local government, the NAD secretariat, to teach them improved methods of fishing, which are the right nets to use so that you're not getting young fish and depleting the lake, and what is sustainable. So the communities, these are projects that are sustained even beyond the project and are monitored by different partners. So we've seen communities improving their yields, both in agriculture, but also going into commercial farming, where they're able now to also supply, partly supply the companies. The objective is to make sure that, yes, they're making use of these opportunities, but we are also not taking away everything from the communities, because these workers that are coming in can consume everything, and then the communities will have nothing. So they have to balance between subsistence and commercial farming to see that it's a win-win situation. The other area I can talk about on a broader level is that one of the areas that we are looking at with different partners as the authority is the linkages between oil and gas and other sectors of the economy. One of the key sectors we are looking at is agriculture. There's a study being done by EPRC, Economic Policy Research Center, to see that how we can make use of these linkages, because in the next 2 years, this year and next year, we are going to peak. We're going to have over 160,000 workers coming into these areas. And we are sure that the people in Hoima, Chikube, Bulise may not produce everything that they need. So how can other farmers from across the country come in to make use of these opportunities? We're also doing other studies on the linkages with the tourism sector. We have all these roads that have opened up the area. We have an international airport. You know, much as it's going to be used primarily for cargo in the beginning, it will also open up. Can we export, you know, some of these agriculture produce? Because I've said we'll peak in the next 2-3 years and then go down. But the farmers have capacity, and this skill will remain. Because once you can produce the standards for oil and gas, you're export ready. So we've also brought the Export Promotion Board on board, to see that can we use this airport if the companies, if planes come in with cargo and drop the cargo, should they go back empty? So the area where the airport is being developed is the Kabale Industrial Park. It will have the airport, the refinery, then it will have petrochemical industries and an agro-based processing industry, cold rooms and the like. So that we are working broadly with the entire economy.
I must say this sounds heaven on earth. If only the implementation is very effective.
Yeah.
And we count on the Uganda Petroleum Authority because your mandate is very far-stretching. But amidst all these achievements and these plans you've talked about, you said some are already operational. I desire to go and visit more, so I'm very passionate about agriculture and transforming livelihoods of the ordinary person to see if all these have yielded socio-economic transformation. But I'm eager to take you back to land acquisition in this area. Initially, when the oil exploration process was starting, we had continuous issues of land. How far have we moved? Have we been able to perfect or correct the wrongs that were there? We had, because Kingfisher, like I said, it's more near communities, within communities, and these are more issues that are going to be raising. So how are you how is this being handled, and what is the current situation?
Okay. Well, the land acquisition for the Kingfisher project and all the other projects started years back, I think about 2017, 2018. So the land was identified, and we went through what we call a resettlement action planning process. Now, in this process, there are different stages. You have people that come in, surveyors, that mark out the coordinates of the land. So once you've marked out the coordinates of the land, then the asset valuers come in to say, okay, the land is from here to here. Who is the affected person? Who is the owner of the land? Who are the land users? Because you have areas where people don't own land, but maybe they have crops, they have temporary structures on the land. So the valuers come in to say, we have 3 houses here, we have 2 families here, we have maybe matoke plants here, maybe we have aloe vera here, and then they attach values. Now, the values that are attached for compensation are from the district compensation matrix. Each district in Uganda, whether you have oil or you don't have oil, you have a compensation matrix for plants, crops, and temporary structures. So when the oil companies come in, they are not the ones who determine what the compensation amount is. It is done in line with the district compensation matrix that's developed by the district land board.
So these issues of willing buyer, willing seller?
No, this is for temporary structures, crops. When it comes to land, land has internationally accepted valuation principles.
True.
You look at, is the land, let's say, near infrastructure, road, water, electricity? What is the land prices in that area over the past 1 or 2 years? Those are the principles. And then you go in and the chief government valuer approves, of the Ministry of Lands, approves the values for the land. And so these are the values that the oil companies use to compensate the project affected persons. Now, beyond just these values that have been approved by the chief government valuer, the law provides for a 15 to 30% disturbance allowance, meaning that over and above what the Ministry of Lands has approved, you pay 15% if you're giving them a notice, I think, of 3 months. If it's shorter, you pay 30%. So the project's paid 30% over and above for the land. Then, after that, remember during the resettlement action planning process, you also do a socio-economic study to see that how is the livelihood of the communities be currently, how is it being impacted by the project, and what can you do better. So through that socio-economic study is where you come up with the livelihood restoration and livelihood improvement activities. We've had we talked about the ones in agriculture, but there's vocational skills. A lot of the youth in communities have gone in for things like carpentry, plumbing, welding, hairdressing, hospitality in the local institutes in Hoima, and they're getting jobs on the camps, in the hotels, in the region. There's also livelihood restoration through financial literacy training, because when you're paying them compensation money, a lot of these communities are seeing these amounts of money for the first time. So you have to give them the skill to know, yes, you have to open a bank account. If you want to invest, these are the principles you look at. You know, if you've said, well, I'm going to buy a boda, how does it relate with what you're doing? How can it sustain you, and the like. So there's a lot of work that has gone on over the past, let's say 6-7 years before the land was acquired and the community is compensated. Yes, there are communities, during the process, there are grievances that come up. Some people might say, oh, you miscounted my crops in the land, or there are different owners, you know, owners of the land. Maybe someone sold off land which was not theirs and the rightful owner comes. There are mechanisms in place. We work with the local leadership in the area land committees, the district community development officer, to address these grievances so that they are addressed before we can compensate.
So can we say that these voices sometimes we hear of politicians alluding that their people have land issues, some come out and claim they have not been compensated, yet their land has been used. Do you first compensate?
Yes, there is no land that will be used for the projects before compensation is paid.
Okay.
There are some disputes that have reached the level of court. For example, in the Tilenga project, I think there were about 7 out of the 620 project affected who decided to go to court, and court said the project should go on as we address the grievances, because their main grievance was not that they don't want the project to go on. They were saying we want to be paid more, or we want some of their demands may not have been in line with what is provided for. So discussions with these holdouts are still going on even up to now. So before the project comes in to start the construction, we ensure that every project affected person is compensated. The 1 or 2 cases that remain outstanding, we ensure that we follow the legal and due process before the land is utilized. So maybe I'll just also add for ECOP, because a lot of the land issues now are being related to ECOP. The compensation for ECOP is now at 68%. In Uganda, there is no construction activity that is going on for the ECOP pipeline because the land acquisition process is still going on. And this is being done in phases. And so what I want to assure the viewers is that before all these areas where you see activity going on, the land has been acquired and the affected communities and persons compensated.
Well, ECOP is the East African crude oil pipeline. So if it's going to pass in your land, just if you're being told, be patient, wait, you'll be compensated before this goes on. Well, we must leave. Let me have your final remark. My
final remark is that these projects are here, work is going on. Let's keep our ears on the ground for the opportunities that are there. And also to emphasize that there's a lot of chatter that goes on here and internationally, but to state that government and the authorities committed to ensuring that these projects are developed in an environmentally sustainable manner and that Ugandans benefit. So call upon all Ugandans, both here and out of the country, and also our partners, to keep supporting the projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gloria Sevikali, who happens to be the corporate manager, Uganda Petroleum Authority. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And of course, those explanations, I know now a number of issues have been clarified, and of course, more hope. Well, let's all support this, and we urge all key stakeholders to ensure that no stone is left unturned as we move towards the final drilling. And of course, seeing oil out of our soils, that our oil will be indeed a blessing and never at all a curse. Have a lovely day. God bless you.
Live